Greetings, YouTube! The Doctor is in. Dr. Yes Papers here, coming at you with another commentary on Dungeons and Dragons. And we are going to be talking about a new spell today. That spell is Conjure Constructs from the Heroes of Faerun Forgotten Realms book. Another one in this series. We're going to go over the spell itself. We're going to give it a grade. We're going to talk about some subclasses. As you can see, it is only usable by wizards. And we are going to be talking about some magic items that go really well with this spell. So, lots to talk about, lots to go over. Don't go anywhere and stay tuned. All right, before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you have any questions or comments, please leave a question or a comment. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, and don't forget to share this video. All right, so here it is, Conjure Constructs. It is a concentration spell, 3rd level, casting time of 1 action, has a range of 60 feet, verbal, somatic, and material component. The material component is a brass cog, but that is, you know, it's. I guess you could argue that that is worth something, possibly, or not worth something. It just depends. But it doesn't go away when you cast the spell. You just have it. It does last for 10 whole minutes. There it is. So we're going to talk a little bit about 10 minutes versus 1 minute. It is a conjuration spell. There is a saving throw that is involved in it, and it does do some force damage. So you conjure a group of intangible orderly spirits that appear as a medium group of modrons or other constructs in an unoccupied space you can see within range, which is 60 feet. The spirits last for the duration, which is 10 minutes. When you cast this spell and as a magic action, let's be very clear about that. This takes an action. So when you cast this spell and as a magic action on subsequent turns, you can command the spirits to target one creature or object you can see within 5 feet of the spirits and create one of the following effects. So we've got Clockwork Force. The target makes a dexterity saving throw, taking 3d6 force damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. That is not great for an action on your turn for a 3rd level spell for 10 minutes. This does not cut it. So essentially, that's about 16 points of damage. I'm sorry, check that. That is about 13 points of damage. So not the best. Not the best at all. Then we have Orderly Ward. The target gains temporary hit points equal to 1d6 plus your spellcasting modifier, which by the time you're casting a 3rd level spell, you should have at least an 18 in. So that means it's going to be about 7 temporary hit points. And it says when you move on your turn, you can also move the spirits up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. So you can target someone and give them, but you can only target one thing at a time for 10 minutes. And you can upcast this spell using a higher level spell slot. The damage and temporary hit points both increase by 1d6 for each spell slot level above 3. So if you cast this at 4th level, that 3d6 force damage becomes 4d6 force damage, which is 14 points of damage once a round, or half. It is a dexterity saving throw, so that, you know, it is what it is. It's force damage. There's not a lot resistant to force damage, but it isn't that much damage. 14 damage a round is not great for your action, which is horrible. So, and you can't cast this on your familiar. It's you conjure a group of intangible orderly spirits that you control. When you cast this spell and as a magic action, you can command them. So it's only you, and that's the problem. It's going to suck up your action. Now, the Orderly Ward is what makes this a pretty good spell. For the fact that for 10 minutes, you can give temporary hit points out as an action. Don't think you're going to be doing this during combat, but I do want to talk about temporary hit points. There is a thing about temporary hit points. So under duration up there, read that. It says temporary hit points last until they're depleted or you finish a long rest. So you could cast this spell at the beginning of the day after you wake up and give everybody a certain number of temporary hit points based off of the level of the spell you're going to cast at. That would be 3rd or higher. And remember, every level above 3rd that you cast a spell with, using that slot, they get an extra 1d6 temporary hit points or an extra 3.5 on average. So at 4th level, this would be 7 plus your ability modifier on average, which should be 4 or 5. So it's going to be 11 or 12 temporary hit points. So that actually is not bad. So, and it is only usable by wizards. There are ways for some other classes to get this, but we're going to concentrate on that. Okay, what grade are we going to give this? The damage part sucks, but the temporary hit points, and you're going to see why I'm going to say this when we talk about magic items, we're going to give this a B, because the Orderly Ward temporary hit points thing is actually pretty good. And if you're doing dungeon running, and I want to talk a little bit about this duration of 10 minutes versus a duration of 1 minute. So if you cast a duration of 1 minute, a duration 1 minute spell, it is essentially going to last for a combat, maybe 2, if you are dungeon room or encounter running. That is, if you're running between encounters or dungeon rooms. And you got to be doing this fast. So maybe 2. Most of your D&D 5th edition 2024 combats are going to last 3 or 4 rounds. So you're going to have some time left. A 10-minute spell, if you are doing dungeon running, will be effective essentially for 2 to 4 encounters if you're running through them. Probably 2, but stretching out to 4 it depends on how you're doing it, but possibly up to 4. And I would suggest that this gets cast before, like at the beginning of the day, or if you know you're going into an encounter, you cast it right before the encounter, you get it going, you go right into the encounter, you're going to give some temporary hit points out, they're going to get depleted, and then after the encounter is over with, or maybe during the encounter you keep giving the temporary hit points out, but after the encounter is over with, you're doing your dungeon running, you use your action and you give those temporary hit points back so everybody has them again for the next encounter. This actually might work well, so we're going to talk about some subclasses now. We talked about the spell, we talked about its grade, we gave it a B. So subclasses for this, Abjure is, I think, an okay choice for this one, just because it stacks well with the Arcane Ward. The Arcane Ward is actually hit points. It's not temporary hit points. So you could kind of tank out a little bit as an Arcane, an Abjure or Wizard. The other one that I kind of thought about was the Blade Singer, possibly because you're going to be in the middle of the fray. You're going to be in melee combat. You're going to be up front. And temporary hit points are always nice when that kind of thing happens. So the other thing that I want to talk about is how this goes well with magic items and particular kinds of magic items, because there are certain magic items that you can juggle. So just like you can spell juggle or heal juggle with good berries, you could essentially do the same thing with this spell if you had some of these items. So for instance, I am going to call up a Ring of Spell Storing. If you have a character who has a Ring of Spell Storing, the ring can store up to 5 levels of spells at a time, and any creature can cast spells 1 through 5 into the ring, and anyone can cast the spells that are stored in it. While wearing this ring, you can cast any spell stored in it. And the spell uses the slot level, the spell save DC, and all that for what's in there. Now, it is an attunement item. However, here's what I'm going to say. You put Conjure Constructs into a Ring of Spell Storing, cast at 5th level. So the big thing with that, and let's call up our little calculator here. There it is right there. The big thing with that is if we cast this at 5th level, we're going to be doing 1d6 at 3rd, 2 at 4, and 3 at 5. So we're getting 4 and 5. So we're getting 3d6. So that's 3.5 times 3 is 10 plus, let's say that it is a 5 for the intelligence modifier for the person who casts the spell. So it'll be about 15 to 16 temporary hit points. And that's a spell, like the night before, you can put Conjure Constructs into that Ring of Spell Storing, and the next day, the fighter can get up, cast the spell, or whoever has it in there, cast the spell for the ring. Everybody's got temps at that point because you can cast that. That person who used it can cast it every turn for 10 minutes. And then you can put different spells into the Ring of Spell Storing. Now, that's not the only item here that can do something like that. We've got Enspelled Armor, which allows you to put a spell of level 8 or lower. It is an attuned item. We've got an Enspelled Staff. And these are all Dungeon Master Guide, by the way. So again, an 8 or lower, and an Enspelled Weapon, which is also 8 or lower. So you could put up to an 8th level Conjure Constructs into here. We've also got things like the Spell Gems. These come out of the Abyss. And depending on the type of gem, you can put different level of spells in here. And once imbued with the spell, the gem can't be imbued again until the next dawn. So you put the spell in, and whoever holds it can cast it. It is an attuned item, unfortunately. Then there are some temporary items like spell scrolls, or we've got spell shards or spell wrought tattoos. These are temporary items that you can make up to a 5th level spell as a tattoo. They can be cast and then they just go off, they disappear after that. There's the Thayan spell tattoo, which is an attuned item. This does come from Forgotten Realms. And this magical tattoo contains the essence of a spell 1 through level 3. Conjure Constructs is a level 3. And while it's on your body, you always have the associated spell prepared, and you can cast a spell using a spell slot you have of the appropriate spell level. So you can also cast a spell once without a spell slot and components. Once it is cast in this way, the tattoo vanishes. That's kind of expensive. So some of these are more expensive than others as solutions for this, but having these in like a Ring of Spell Storing, have a non-spellcaster cast this at the beginning of the day and then putting different spells in here allows everybody to get temporary hit points for quite some time without having to waste that spell slot. So that is what I have for everybody today. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I will catch everybody later.